The massive space station floated like a silver city among the stars. Inside its biggest meeting hall, hundreds of aliens sat in rows watching screens that showed a dark, rocky planet below. This was the Galactic Council, and today was test day. Again, every species that wanted to join their peaceful alliance had to pass one simple test first. Simple to understand, but almost impossible to survive. The planet on the screens was called Torment Prime, and it was designed to kill everything that landed on it. The gravity was 3 times stronger than most worlds, which meant every step felt like carrying 2 other people on your back. The air contained chemicals that burned the lungs and made breathing feel like swallowing fire. Acid rain fell from the sky every few hours, melting anything it touched that was not protected. The ground was covered with sharp rocks that could cut through metal boots. Lightning struck constantly from the storm clouds that never went away, but the worst part was not the planet itself. The worst part was what lived there. Creatures with 6 legs and razor-sharp teeth hunted in packs across the burning landscape. Flying monsters with acid spit circled overhead looking for prey that moved. Plants grew everywhere that could poison or strangle anything that got too close. Even the water was dangerous, filled with tiny organisms that ate flesh from the inside out. Council leader Vexmar stood at the front of the hall looking tired. His 4 eyes were dim and his blue skin had turned pale from watching so many species fail. In 3,000 years of testing, no one had ever lasted more than 7 days on Torment Prime. Most called for emergency rescue within hours. The screens showed the latest attempt. The Velak had sent their best warriors to the test. These were 7-foot-tall creatures with natural armor and muscles that could crush stone. They were born fighters who had never known fear on their homeworld. The council watched as the Velak team landed on Torment Prime in their protective suits. Within the first hour, the acid rain started. The Velak warriors tried to find shelter, but every cave and overhang was already occupied by hungry creatures. Their suits began to smoke as the acid ate through the metal. One warrior screamed as something with too many teeth grabbed his leg and tried to drag him into a dark hole. 6 hours later, all 5 Velak warriors were huddled together, crying and begging for rescue. The emergency transport beam activated and pulled them back to safety. They sat in the medical bay, shaking and refusing to talk about what they had seen down there. Next came the granite people. These aliens looked like walking rocks and could survive in the vacuum of space without any protection. They did not need to breathe and could eat almost anything for energy. If anyone could handle Torment Prime, it should have been them. The granite people lasted 2 whole days. They built shelters from the sharp rocks and seemed to be doing well until the Shadow Pack found them. These were the smart predators that hunted with tactics and teamwork. The granite people had never faced anything, like creatures that could think and plan attacks. Their rescue beacon activated on day 2 and they were pulled up barely alive. The legendary Shadow Hunters came next. These aliens were born in complete darkness and had evolved to be perfect killers. They could see in total blackness, move without making sound, and track prey across any terrain. They had never met anything they could not hunt and kill. 4 days later, the Shadow Hunters were also rescued. They had managed longer than anyone else, but even they could not handle what lived on Torment Prime. When they came back up, their leader just said one thing: the darkness there hunts back. Now it was time for the newest species to try. The humans. Vexmar looked at the 5 creatures standing before him and felt sorry for them. They were so small compared to other species, barely reaching his shoulder in height. Their skin looked soft and pink, like it had never seen real danger. They carried simple weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to what other species brought. Their protective gear looked like something children might wear to play outside. The human leader was named Deho, and he stood calmly listening as Vexmar explained the test rules. Behind him stood 4 other humans. There was Hyejin, a female, with short black hair who kept looking at the screens of Torment Prime like she was planning something fun. Boram was a stocky male who was examining the alien technology around the room with curious eyes. Tae-sung was a thin male taking notes about everything Vexmar said. Minho was a young male pilot who seemed relaxed, like this was just another day at work. Sujin was a female scientist who was asking questions about the local wildlife on Torment Prime. Your species is very new to space travel, Vexmar said gently. Perhaps you should wait and prepare more before attempting this test. Many species take years to get ready, and even then most fail. The humans looked at each other and seemed to have a silent conversation with just their eyes. Then Deho smiled and said they were ready to go. But you do not understand, Vexmar continued. This test has broken warriors who conquered entire star systems. The Valak are considered some of the strongest fighters in the galaxy, and they lasted only 6 hours. The Granite people can survive anything, and they barely made it 2 days. Even the Shadow Hunters who fear nothing lasted only 4 days before calling for help. Sujin raised her hand politely. Excuse me, but what kind of creatures live down there? She sounded excited, like someone had just told her about a new zoo to visit. Vexmar blinked all 4 eyes in confusion. Deadly ones, he said. Things that will hunt you constantly. Poisonous plants that kill with a touch. Acid rain that melts flesh. Gravity that will crush your bones. Air that burns your lungs. Creatures that eat other creatures alive. The humans listened to this list of horrors and started talking among themselves in their own language. They were not speaking in fear or panic. They were making plans. Vexmar heard words like shelter and water source and watched schedules like they were going camping instead of to a death world. Hyejin looked up at the screens showing Torment Prime and laughed. This looks like the mountains back home during storm season, she said. Minho nodded and added that the gravity was only 3 times normal, which was not much worse than the training centrifuge they used for pilot school. Are you not afraid? Vexmar asked in amazement. Sujin grinned and said this sounded like Tuesday back home on Earth. The other council members began whispering among themselves. These humans were either very brave or completely insane. Most species spent days preparing mentally for the test. They meditated or prayed or said goodbye to their families like they were going to die. The humans were acting like they were about to go on a vacation. The transport ship was ready. Other species usually spent hours checking their equipment and making final preparations. The humans just grabbed their simple packs and walked onto the ship like they were catching a bus to work. As the transport headed toward Torment Prime, the screens showed other rescue ships pulling up the latest failures. A group of crystal beings who could withstand temperatures hot enough to melt metal were being carried out on stretchers. They had lasted only 3 hours before something down there had cracked their seemingly unbreakable bodies. The humans watched this and started discussing the best ways to build emergency shelters and how to purify water in hostile environments. They were not watching the rescue ships with fear. They were watching them with curiosity, wondering what mistakes the other species had made that they could avoid. The transport ship reached Torment Prime just as another lightning storm started. The screens showed the dark surface being lit up by constant electrical strikes. The acid rain was beginning to fall, turning the air green and toxic. Somewhere in that nightmare landscape, the predators were already moving, preparing to hunt whatever landed next. The humans stood at the transport door ready to drop down. They looked calm and prepared like soldiers heading into a familiar battle. Vexmar made one last attempt to save them. The test is to survive long enough to call for help when things become too dangerous, he explained. There is no shame in calling for rescue quickly. The point is to show you can recognize when you need your allies. Deho nodded politely and said they understood. Then he looked at his team and asked if everyone was ready. All 5 humans smiled and said yes. The transport door opened and the humans dropped down into hell itself. The last thing the council heard before the communication cut out was Sujin laughing with joy as she fell toward the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Vexmar watched the empty screens and wondered if they would ever hear from the humans again. Most species called for help within the first few hours. Some lasted a day or 2 if they were very strong or very lucky. But something told him these Deathworlders might be different. The way they had looked at Torment Prime was not like other species. Everyone else saw a test to survive. The humans had looked at it like a problem to solve. The council settled in to watch and wait. In a few hours they would probably be sending another rescue ship, but for the first time in 3,000 years, Vexmar was not completely sure what would happen. Next, the humans landed on Torment Prime just as the first wave of acid rain began to fall from the dark storm clouds above. The droplets hissed and steamed when they hit the rocky ground, sending up small clouds of toxic vapor. Other species had worn full environmental suits with multiple layers of protection and emergency oxygen supplies. The humans just pulled on simple raincoats like they were going for a walk in bad weather. Deho looked around at the landscape that had terrified every other species in the galaxy. Sharp black rocks jutted up from the ground like broken teeth. In the distance, lightning struck continuously, turning the sky purple and green. The air tasted of metal and burning chemicals. The gravity made every movement feel like walking through thick mud while carrying heavy weights. "Okay, team," he called out to his group. His voice sounded calm and steady, like a teacher giving instructions to students. "Standard survival protocol, just like we practiced back home. Hygiene, you take point and find us some high ground for a base camp. Boram, check what materials we can salvage and use. Tae-sung, start mapping the local hazards and resources. Minho, scout the area for anything useful. Sujin, catalog the local wildlife and plants." The Galactic Council watched through their hidden cameras, expecting to see the humans panic and call for rescue within the first hour. Instead, they watched something that made no sense at all. Yijin looked at the cliff face that rose up behind their landing spot. It was covered in acid rain, and lightning was striking near the top every few seconds. The rock looked slippery and dangerous, with sharp edges that could cut through gloves. She smiled and started climbing. The council members leaned forward in their seats, watching in amazement. The small human female was climbing a cliff in the middle of an acid storm. She should have been terrified and hiding. Instead, she was laughing as she went up the rock face like this was the most fun she had experienced in months. "How is she doing that?" whispered one of the younger council members. "The acid should be burning through her protective gear." Vexmar studied the screens more carefully. The humans were not wearing the same kind of protective equipment that other species used. Their gear looked simple and basic, almost primitive. But somehow it was working. The acid rain that had eaten through advanced alien technology was just rolling off their simple coats. Meanwhile, Boram was walking around the crash site of a previous test team. The wreckage of alien technology was scattered across the ground, twisted and melted by the harsh environment. Other species had tried to bring advanced equipment to help them survive. All of it had failed within hours. Boram picked up pieces of the destroyed machinery and started examining them closely. He was humming a cheerful tune while he worked, completely ignoring the fact that lightning was striking the ground around him every few minutes. When a particularly large bolt hit a metal rod just 20 feet away, he looked up and smiled like someone had just given him a present. "That will be useful for conducting electricity," he said into his radio. "I can use this to power whatever we need." The council members looked at each other in confusion. This human was treating the deadly lightning strikes like a helpful resource instead of a threat to avoid. Tae-sung had found something even more interesting. He was kneeling next to a pool of bubbling liquid that had killed 3 different species during previous tests. The liquid was highly acidic and gave off toxic fumes that could dissolve lungs from the inside. He was taking samples of it with simple equipment and making notes in a small book. "Fascinating," he said over the radio to his team. "The acid concentration is much higher than we expected, but the mineral content suggests it might be useful for certain applications. I think I can neutralize it with some basic chemistry if we need clean water." The council was starting to realize that something was very wrong with their understanding of these humans. Every other species had seen Torment Prime as a collection of deadly threats to avoid. The humans were seeing it as a collection of useful resources to exploit. Minho had found the local wildlife. A pack of torment beasts was sleeping in a cave about half a mile from the landing site. These creatures were the size of large vehicles with 6 legs ending in claws that could slice through metal. Their hide was thick enough to stop energy. Weapons and their teeth could bite through almost anything. They hunted in coordinated groups using tactics that had surprised and killed many previous test subjects. Minho spent an hour watching them sleep and studying their behavior patterns. He took notes on how they positioned themselves for defense and how they organized their pack structure. Then he did something that made every council member hold their breath in terror. He walked past them. The torment beasts woke up as he approached and looked at him with hungry eyes. These creatures had never seen prey that did not run or fight when discovered. Minho just kept walking at a steady pace, staying calm and avoiding direct eye contact. He moved like he belonged there, like he was just another predator going about his business. The pack leader raised its head and sniffed the air, trying to decide if this strange creature was worth hunting. Minho continued walking without showing fear or aggression. After a few tense moments, the torment beasts decided he was not interesting enough to bother with and went back to sleep. "How is he still alive?" gasped one of the council members. "Those creatures have killed dozens of warriors." Sujin had found something that made the council question everything they thought they knew about biology and survival. She was standing in a field of death flowers, examining them closely with scientific instruments. These plants were legendary killers that released toxins so powerful they could kill most species just from the smell. Their beautiful purple petals hid one of the most deadly poisons in the galaxy. Sujin was taking detailed notes and collecting samples while breathing normally. She should have been dead within minutes of approaching the flowers. Instead, she was talking to them like they were interesting friends she had just met. "These are actually quite beautiful," she said over the radio to her team. "The toxin structure is really fascinating. It works by attacking the nervous system in a very specific way. I think I can create an antidote using some basic chemistry and maybe some of the local minerals." She reached out and touched one of the flowers gently. The council members expected to see her collapse immediately. Instead, she smiled and continued her examination. "The scent is quite pleasant once you understand how to process it safely," she continued. "I think these flowers might actually be useful for creating medicines if we can isolate the active compounds properly." By the end of the first day, the council was watching something that had never happened before in 3,000 years of testing. Instead of 5 terrified creatures huddled together waiting for rescue, the screens showed 5 humans who had built a comfortable camp, had mapped the local area, and were cooking dinner over a fire. The fire was made from wood that had been struck by lightning and was still glowing with electrical energy. They were using acid rainwater that Taisung had neutralized to cook local plants that Sujin had identified as safe to eat. Their shelter was built on the high ground that Hyejin had found using materials that Boram had salvaged from previous failed expeditions. The humans were not just surviving on Torment Prime. They were thriving. Vexmar watched the screens showing the humans sitting around their fire talking and laughing, while lightning struck around them, and acid rain fell on their simple shelter. In the distance, packs of deadly creatures moved through the darkness, but the humans seemed completely unconcerned. "This is impossible," he said quietly. "No species has ever lasted more than a few hours without calling for help. These humans have been down there for an entire day, and they are acting like they are on vacation. Maybe we have been wrong about what makes a species dangerous," suggested one of the younger council members. "We always thought the most dangerous creatures were the ones with the biggest teeth or the strongest weapons. But these humans are small and weak-looking. Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are basic, yet they are succeeding where everyone else has failed." The council continued watching as the humans settled in for their first night on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. They took turns keeping watch, but they did not seem worried or afraid. They were just being careful and prepared like experienced campers who knew how to handle themselves in the wilderness. As the night wore on, strange sounds echoed across the landscape. Other species had described these sounds as the voices of nightmares, things that drove test subjects insane with fear. The humans listened to them with interest and curiosity like they were hearing new music for the first time. That howling pattern suggests a pack-hunting behavior, Sujin noted. Probably nocturnal predators working together. The frequency indicates they are trying to disorient prey by creating confusing sound patterns. "Should we be worried?" asked Boram while adding more lightning wood to their fire. "Nah," replied Minho. "They are just talking to each other. As long as we do not act like prey, they will probably leave us alone." The council members looked at each other in growing amazement. These humans were not just surviving the test. They were studying it, learning from it, and adapting to it like it was just another interesting challenge to overcome. For the first time in 3,000 years, Day 3 on Torment Prime brought something that made even the bravest council members feel cold fear in their hearts. The automated warning system started screaming alerts throughout the space station, Red lights flashed and emergency sirens wailed as the sensors detected movement in the deepest caves of the nightmare planet below. The Shadow Pack was waking up. These were not ordinary predators like the torment beasts or the flying acid spitters. The Shadow Pack were the apex killers of torment prime creatures so dangerous that the Council usually pulled test subjects off the planet before they appeared. In 3,000 years of testing, only 12 species had ever encountered the Shadow Pack, and none of them had survived to tell about it. The creatures were 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor that could stop energy weapons. Their claws were sharper than surgical knives and could cut through steel like paper. They had 4 eyes that could see in complete darkness, and minds intelligent enough to use complex hunting tactics. They did not just kill for food, they killed for sport, and they never gave up once they started hunting. Emergency Protocol Alpha activated automatically, and urgent messages were sent to the human team on the surface. Every previous species had been grateful for this warning because it meant immediate rescue was coming. The Shadow Pack had never failed to kill everything they hunted. Vexmar personally sent the emergency transmission to the humans. His voice was filled with panic as he spoke into the communication device. "Emergency Protocol Alpha," he said quickly. "The Shadow Pack has been detected moving toward your location. These are the most dangerous predators on the planet. Prepare for immediate extraction. We are sending rescue ships now." Daeho's voice came back over the radio, calm and steady like he was discussing the weather. "Understood, we see them too. Thanks for the warning." Vexmar blinked all 4 of his eyes in confusion. "You do not understand," he transmitted urgently. "These creatures have never failed to kill. They are death itself walking. They have wiped out entire military units in hours. We must get you off that planet immediately." "That is very kind of you," replied Hyojin, "but we are busy right now." The council members gathered around the viewing screens, watching in horror as the Shadow Pack emerged. From their caves, there were 7 of them moving in perfect formation across the rocky landscape. Their black armor gleamed in the lightning flashes and their eyes glowed red in the darkness. They moved with the fluid grace of natural-born killers, heading straight for the human camp. "This is madness," whispered one council member. "Those humans have no idea what is coming for them." But as the council watched, something unprecedented began to happen. Instead of being hunted, the humans started to hunt back. Taesung had been studying the movement patterns of various predators for 3 days. He had noticed that the Shadow Pack were ambush hunters who relied on surprising their prey. They became confused and hesitant when their targets fought back intelligently instead of running in panic. He shared this information with his team, and they began to implement tactics that no other species had ever tried. Instead of hiding and hoping for rescue, they started to turn the Shadow Pack's own hunting methods against them. Boram had spent the last 2 days rigging traps using salvaged alien technology in ways that even impressed the council engineers watching from above. He had created pressure sensors from crashed ship components and explosive devices from the chemical reactions of local plants. His traps were hidden throughout the area around their camp, waiting for unwary predators. The first Shadow Pack hunter triggered one of these traps while trying to circle around behind the human position. The explosion sent the creature flying 20 feet through the air. It landed hard and shook its head in confusion. Nothing had ever set traps for the Shadow Pack before. They were always the ones doing the hunting. Minho was doing something even more dangerous. He was using the Shadow Pack's own hunting instincts against them by leading individual creatures away from the main group. He would appear at the edge of their vision just long enough to get their attention, then disappear again. The predators could not resist following what looked like easy prey. But Minho was not prey. He was leading them into carefully planned ambush points where the other humans were waiting. The Shadow Pack found themselves being hunted by creatures they had never encountered before. These humans did not act like any prey species they had ever stalked. The most amazing thing happened when Sujin did something that made every council member question their understanding of biology and intelligence. She walked directly toward Yi, the pack leader, the largest and most dangerous of the Shadow Pack hunters. The pack leader was a massive creature that had killed hundreds of other beings over its lifetime. It had never met anything that did not run from it in terror. When Sujin approached it calmly and confidently, the creature stopped moving and tilted its head in confusion. Sujin began to communicate with the pack leader not with words, but with body language and scent markers she had figured out by watching them hunt. She had spent hours studying their behavior patterns and had learned to recognize their communication signals. "She is negotiating with it," gasped a council member in disbelief. The pack leader, which had never encountered anything like this situation, sat down to think about what was happening. This small creature was not acting like prey. It was not showing fear or aggression. It was communicating in ways that the pack leader could understand. Sujin slowly reached into her pack and pulled out some of the local food she had prepared. She offered it to the pack leader as a gift, showing that she came in peace. The massive predator sniffed the food cautiously, then took a small bite. The taste was unlike anything the pack leader had ever experienced. Sujin had used her knowledge of local plants to create flavors that appealed to the shadow pack biology. The creature made a sound that might have been pleasure and sat down more comfortably. The other shadow pack members gathered around, watching this strange interaction. They had never seen their leader behave this way with any other creature. Sujin continued to offer food and communicate with them using their own methods. By the end of day 3, something impossible was happening. The shadow pack was not hunting the humans anymore. They were following them around like curious animals, trying to understand these strange new creatures who did not fear them. Heejin found this amusing and started scratching behind the pack, leader ears like it was a large dog. The massive predator made a rumbling sound of contentment and leaned into her touch. Sujin has always been good with animals, Heejin explained over the radio to the stunned council members, even the mean ones. The council watched in amazement as the most feared predators in the galaxy became friends with the human team. The Shadow Pack began helping the humans by showing them safe paths through dangerous areas and warning them about other threats. On day 4, the humans were not just surviving on Torment Prime. They were thriving with the help of creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. The Shadow Pack had become their guides and protectors. Day 5 brought even more surprises. The humans had not only tamed the Shadow Pack, but had also figured out how to work with the other dangerous creatures on the planet. The Torment Beasts were helping them gather materials. The flying acid spitters were serving as scouts. Even the poisonous plants were being cultivated into useful gardens. The council realized they were not watching a survival test anymore. They were watching humans turn the most dangerous planet in the galaxy into something that looked like a nature preserve, where deadly predators lived peacefully alongside their new human friends. Vexmar sat in his chair, staring at the screens, in wonder. In 3,000 years of testing, no species had lasted more than 7 days on Torment Prime. The humans had been there for 5 days and showed no signs of wanting to leave. They were not just passing the test, they were rewriting the rules of what survival meant. The emergency rescue ships that had been sent to extract the humans were still waiting in orbit. Their crews were confused about what to do since the humans had never actually called for help. The Shadow Pack was still active on the surface, but instead of killing the test subjects, they were playing with them. For the first time in Council history, the test subjects were having more fun than the observers. The humans were laughing and exploring and making friends while the Council members sat in worried silence, wondering what would happen next. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous thing about humans was not their ability to survive impossible situations. It was their ability to make friends with the things that were supposed to kill them. Day 7 arrived on Torment Prime, and something happened that had never occurred in 3,000 years of Galactic Council testing. The automated extraction protocol activated, sending the standard message to retrieve the test subjects, but the humans did not respond with a request for rescue. Instead, they sent back a message that made every council member question everything they thought they knew about the test. "Can we stay longer?" asked Daeho over the communication system. "This place is actually quite nice once you get used to it, and we are learning so much." Vexmar stared at the communication device like it had grown extra limbs. In the entire history of the test, every single species had been desperate to leave Torment Prime as quickly as possible. Most called for emergency rescue within hours. Even the strongest and bravest warriors begged to be taken away after a few days of horror. The humans wanted to extend their stay. "You want to remain on the surface," Minho continued over the radio. "The acid rain is great for cleaning our equipment, and the high gravity is excellent exercise. Boram has figured out how to use the constant lightning strikes to power all kinds of useful devices. Sujin has made friends with most of the local wildlife and is learning amazing things about their behavior." Friends, whispered a council member. "Did he say, friends?" Sujin's voice came over the communication system, sounding excited like a scientist who had discovered something wonderful. "The Shadow Pack is actually incredibly intelligent once you take time to communicate with them properly. They have a complex social structure, and they are excellent teachers about surviving in harsh environments. The death flowers smell quite lovely when you approach them correctly, and they have medical properties we never knew about. The torment beasts are actually quite gentle creatures who just needed someone to show them where to find the best food sources." The council held an emergency meeting while the humans continued exploring Torment Prime like it was a fascinating vacation destination. For 3,000 years, the test had worked exactly the same way with every species. Candidates were dropped on the Nightmare Planet, and within hours or days they would call for rescue when the dangers became too much to handle. The test was designed to measure something very specific. It was meant to show which species could recognize when they were in over their heads and ask their allies for help. The council wanted to know that new member species would reach out for assistance when facing impossible situations rather than suffering alone or making things worse by trying to handle everything themselves. The ability to call for help when needed was considered one of the most important qualities for joining a peaceful galactic alliance. Species that tried to solve every problem alone often caused more damage than good. The test was supposed to prove that candidates understood the value of cooperation and support, but the humans had turned the entire concept upside down. They had not called for help because they had not needed help. They had taken the most dangerous situation imaginable and turned it into a learning experience. They had made the impossible test not just survivable but enjoyable. Every species that came before them saw Torment Prime as a nightmare to endure until rescue arrived. The humans saw it as an interesting challenge to solve. Every other species focused on surviving long enough to call for assistance. The humans focused on understanding the environment well enough to work with it instead of against it. Maybe, suggested a young council member named Kex Ree, "We have been testing the wrong thing all along." Elder Vexmar was quiet for a long time as he thought about this possibility. The test was created to identify species that knew when to ask for help. But what if there was something more important than knowing when to ask for help? What if the real measure of a species' worth was knowing how to give help to others? He activated the viewing screens again and looked at what the humans were doing on Torment Prime. They were not just surviving anymore. They had transformed the entire experience. Heejin was creating detailed maps of safe routes across the dangerous terrain. These maps would be incredibly valuable for any future visitors to the planet. She was marking locations of fresh water, sources, areas with good shelter and paths that avoided the most dangerous predators. Boram was building permanent shelters using local materials and salvage technology. These structures could protect other species from the acid rain and lightning storms. He was also creating power systems that could provide energy for emergency equipment using the natural electrical activity of the planet. Tae Sung was developing medicines and treatments using local plants and minerals. He had already created antidotes for several of the deadly toxins that had killed previous test subjects. His medical knowledge could save lives of future visitors who might accidentally encounter dangerous substances. Minho was writing a comprehensive guide for living safely alongside the local wildlife. His observations about predator behavior and communication methods could help other species avoid conflicts with the dangerous creatures. He had learned how to read the warning signs that meant predators were hunting and how to move through their territories without triggering aggressive responses. Sujin was running what looked like a diplomatic mission between different species of local creatures. She had established communication with the Shadow Pack and was teaching them to interact peacefully with other animals on the planet. The ecosystem was becoming more balanced and less violent under her guidance. The humans were not taking the test. They were fixing it. Instead of just proving they could survive until rescue came, they were making it so that future test subjects would have a much better chance of survival. They were creating resources and knowledge that could help other species succeed where so many had failed before. What if, asked Vexmar slowly, this was never really about survival at all? What if the real test is about what kind of species we want in our alliance? Do we want species that can call for help when they need it, or do we want species that can provide help when others need it? The council members looked at each other as this new idea settled in their minds. For 3,000 years they had been looking for species that were wise enough to know their limitations, but the humans had shown them something different. They had shown the value of species that could take any limitation and find a way around. The viewing screen showed the humans working together to solve problems that had defeated every other species in the galaxy. They were not just surviving on Torment Prime. They were making it a better place for everyone who might come after. Day 8 brought a request from the humans that shocked the council even more. They asked permission to bring some of their friends from Earth to see the amazing things they had discovered on Torment Prime. They wanted to turn the Nightmare Test World into a research station where scientists could study extreme environments and dangerous wildlife safely. We think this place has incredible potential, Deho explained over the communication system. With the right infrastructure and safety measures, it could become an amazing center for learning about survival in harsh conditions. The local creatures are fascinating, and the environmental challenges could teach us so much about adapting to difficult situations. The council realized that the humans were not just passing the test. They were offering to share their success with others. They wanted to take their knowledge and use it to help other species learn the same skills they had developed. This was the opposite of what every other test subject had done. Other species tried to get away from Torment Prime as quickly as possible, and never wanted to think about it again. The humans wanted to bring more people to experience what they had learned there. That night, the council made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. They voted to discontinue the traditional survival test and replace it with something completely new. Instead of testing species to see if they could survive until rescue came, they would test species to see what kind of help they could provide to others. The humans had shown them that the most valuable members of a galactic alliance were not those who knew when to ask for help. The most valuable members were those who could turn any problem into an opportunity to help others. Torment Prime would never be the same. Neither would the galaxy. The Galactic Council made a decision that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 week earlier. Instead of sending rescue ships to extract the humans from Torment Prime, they sent diplomatic vessels to meet with them on the surface. This had never been attempted before because no one had ever considered it safe to land on the Nightmare Planet, while test subjects were still there. But the humans had changed everything about Torment Prime. The planet that had been a guaranteed death sentence for 3,000 years was now sending out invitations for visitors. The diplomatic shuttle landed on a flat area that Boram had cleared and prepared specifically for aircraft. The landing pad was protected from acid rain by clever overhangs and equipped with lightning rods that channeled electrical strikes safely into the ground. Other species would have needed full environmental suits and emergency life support to step outside their ships. The council representatives found they could breathe normally in the filtered atmosphere that the humans had created. "Welcome to paradise," called out Deho cheerfully as the diplomatic team emerged from their shuttle. He was standing next to a creature that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. The Shadow Pack leader was playing a game that looked like fetch with Su Jin throwing a stick and bringing it back with its massive jaws. Paradise repeated, Vexmar stepping carefully onto the surface of what had been the most dangerous planet in known space. His protective suit felt unnecessary as he looked around at the transformed landscape. The acid pools that had killed so many previous test subjects had been converted into beautiful mineral baths that sparkled with safe chemical reactions. The lightning strikes that had destroyed advanced alien technology were now powering a network of devices that provided light warmth and communication across the entire continent. The sharp rocks that had cut through metal boots were now arranged into comfortable pathways and seating areas. "Oh yes," replied Hyejin with a bright smile. Boram figured out how to neutralize the atmospheric toxins using the natural lightning and some basic chemistry. The acid rain is actually fantastic for certain kinds of farming once you know how to process it correctly. Tae Sung has grown some amazing vegetables using the mineral-rich water. Once you understand how the local ecosystem works, it really is quite peaceful here. The council representatives looked around in amazement at the transformation. Families of humans had arrived on supply ships, and children were swimming in pools that had been deadly toxic just days before. The humans had built viewing platforms where tourists could safely watch the spectacular lightning storms that lit up the sky in brilliant colors. The dreaded torment beasts were giving rides to laughing human children who treated the massive predators like friendly ponies. How? Asked Vexmar. It was the only word he could manage as he tried to process what he was seeing. The Shadow Pack leader approached the council group and sat down politely like a well-trained pet, waiting for instructions. Sujin scratched behind its ears and it made a rumbling sound of contentment. The creature that had been the ultimate nightmare of countless species was now acting like a gentle giant who enjoyed meeting new people. "We are from Earth," explained He-Jin simply. This place reminded us of home. That simple statement contained the key to understanding everything that had happened. The council members had assumed that Torment Prime was the most dangerous environment possible. But to humans who had evolved on a world filled with hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, deadly animals, poisonous plants, extreme weather, and countless other hazards, Torment Prime was just another interesting challenge. Where other species saw impossible dangers, humans saw familiar problems with solutions they had already learned. The acid rain was just another form of chemical precipitation like the industrial pollution they dealt with in their cities. The extreme gravity was just heavier than the high-gravity training they used for space travel. The dangerous wildlife was just another collection of animals that needed to be understood and respected. The lightning storms that had destroyed alien technology were similar to the electrical phenomena that humans had learned to harness for power generation. The toxic atmosphere was just another air quality problem like the ones they solved in their factories and cities. The hostile environment was just another extreme climate like the ones humans lived in at their polar regions, deserts, mountains, and deep ocean facilities. But the real difference was not just in their experience with dangerous environments. The real difference was in how humans approached problems. Every other species that came to Torment Prime tried to survive it, endure it, or escape from it. Humans tried to understand it, work with it, and improve it. The council spent the next several days touring the transformed planet and learning about the human approach to problem solving. They watched Sujin teaching young aliens how to communicate safely with the local wildlife. They saw Boram showing council engineers how to build structures that could withstand the extreme conditions. They observed Taisung training medical personnel in treatments for environmental hazards using local resources. But the most impressive thing was not what the humans had accomplished for themselves. It was what they had created for others. Every solution they developed was designed to be shared. Every improvement they made was intended to help future visitors. Every lesson they learned was documented and taught to anyone who wanted to know. The Great Test was officially discontinued the following year. In its place, the council created something completely new called the Deathworlder Exchange Program. Instead of dropping species onto nightmare worlds to see if they could survive, the council partnered them with humans who would show them how to thrive in any environment. The program was incredibly successful. Species that had failed the original test repeatedly were now learning to handle extreme environments with confidence. The humans did not just teach survival techniques. They taught the mindset needed to see problems as opportunities and dangers as challenges to overcome. Torment Prime became the galaxy's first extreme environment resort. Millions of tourists visited every year to experience safe adventure under the guidance of human experts and their alien friends. The Shadow Pack became the planet official tour guides, leading groups of visitors through the most spectacular and dangerous areas, while keeping everyone perfectly safe. The Death Flowers were cultivated into the most beautiful botanical gardens in the galaxy. Visitors came from across the stars to see the incredible displays and learn about the medical properties that Sujin had discovered. The acid rain was bottled and sold as a powerful cleaning solution that was completely safe when properly handled. The lightning storms became a major attraction with viewing areas that provided spectacular shows of natural electrical display. The high-gravity areas were turned into training facilities for athletes and military personnel, who wanted to develop greater strength and endurance. The transformation was so complete that new visitors often had trouble believing that Torment Prime had ever been dangerous. The planet that had once been synonymous with death and terror was now famous as a place of learning, adventure, and natural beauty. Every time a new species asked how the humans had passed the impossible test, the answer was always the same. We did not pass the test. We made it better. The galaxy learned an important lesson from the Deathworlders. The scariest thing about dangerous species was not that they could survive anything. It was that they could take anything, no matter how terrible, and somehow transform it into something wonderful. They did not just laugh at death. They invited it over for dinner and sent it home with leftovers and a care package for its family. The final report filed by the Galactic Council simply read, "Test failed successfully. Recommend immediate adoption of all Deathworlder solutions for future challenges." Humanity was not just accepted into the Galactic Alliance. They became the species that other civilizations called when they had problems that seemed impossible to solve. The humans would show up, look at the situation, and say something like, "This reminds us of Tuesday back home." Then they would get to work, turning disasters into opportunities and nightmares into dreams. The universe became a much more interesting place once the Deathworlders joined the neighborhood. Every problem became a chance for humans to show their new alien friends that there was always a solution if you were willing to think differently about the challenge. And somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Council, a small note was added to the file about Earth and its people. Warning: these beings consider everything fun, approach with caution and a sense of humor. They will try to fix whatever is broken and make friends with whatever is dangerous. Results may include radical improvements to local conditions and unexpected levels of enjoyment. The galaxy would never be the same. But everyone agreed it was much better this way.